I use voice to text, and last night it picked up something peculiar. I was cooking dinner and didn't feel like washing my hands 10,000 times to pick up the phone. I've become too lazy for most tasks, but I have technology to thank for that. I was alone in the house. For context, I live in a small cabin surrounded by some woods. The next house is a 10-minute walk from here, so I'm not so isolated. Still, at night, it gets pretty quiet. I'm saying this in order for you to understand that there were no other sounds outside for the phone to pick up. The whole house was silent, apart from my voice and the sounds I made while cooking. I was texting my friend about some trip to the mountains. He'd asked me if I was going to bring my tent, to which I replied, "Yeah, I am." He texted back a minute later, "I didn't ask you where you were, LOL." I blinked a few times, reading the text from the lit up screen. What did he mean? I checked my text, which said, "Yeah, I am here." I hadn't dictated the last word. Of course, I didn't initially think something weird was going on. I dictated back, I meant I was bringing the tent. I don't know why it picked up here. I'm using voice to text. Sorry. I checked to see if the phone wrote the message correctly, and it had. 10 minutes later, I told Brian, my friend, that I didn't want to bring my shotgun, but I would if I had to. He texted back, "What?" I frowned and left my pen on the stove to check what I'd written before. "I don't want to bring my shotgun, but she's here." Was that some type of autocorrect? Some function to fill in sentences? AI? I don't know what's up with my phone. Sorry. I don't know what's up with my phone. She's standing by the sink. Sorry. WHO is standing by the sink? I looked up to the sink. No one was there, and yet the sound of oil sizzling had been turned by my paranoia into the sound of someone breathing. No one. My fucking autocorrect is acting up. No one. Don't open the oven. Are you fucking with me, dude? It's funny. Are you bringing your shotgun or not? I glared at the oven. Should I check? I didn't really want to. I'll call you after I'm done. I dictated. I'll call you after I'm done. She's almost done. Who the fuck is she? My throat was dry. I turned off the stove and washed my hands, absently wiping them with a towel while staring at the oven. I grabbed the phone. I still wanted to see if it would pick up something else, so I tried one last time. I don't know. The phone picked up. She wants to come out of the oven now. My heart stopped. My legs surged desperately for the fastest way upstairs, almost tripping, and I basically crawled to my bedroom, where I called Brian and told him what had happened. He figured that I was just freaked out about living alone for so long, in the woods, and offered to pick me up and drive me to his place. I reluctantly agreed. When he arrived, I sprinted past the kitchen and got into the car. He thought that the whole thing was funny, but I couldn't bring myself to smile back. While we were talking on the phone, I'd heard the oven. There's a man who keeps showing up outside of my window, and he keeps making baby noises. It started 2 weeks ago, the faint cries of a baby coming from outside my window, probably 50 or so feet into my backyard, which my window overlooks. At first, I was able to turn my fan up and block it out, but after a couple of nights, it grew louder or closer. Attempts to look out my window failed to find its source, and it was far too loud now to try to ignore. Finally, one night, I saw the silhouette of a man, and I seized my chance. After throwing on a coat and slippers to go meet this creep, I suddenly realized how dangerous this was. Some strange man making crying baby sounds in my backyard. I grabbed my baseball bat and proceeded to the back door. When I opened the back door, a wall of rain greeted me. It was pouring sheets of water, slapping against the porch and pooling around my feet. Moments ago, the sky had been clear. Now it felt like a storm had rolled in just for me. I tightened my grip on the bat and stepped out, the cold soaking through my slippers almost instantly. "Hey!" I shouted into the dark. The word barely made it past my lips. The rain swallowed it whole, turning my voice into a muffled echo that died before it reached the trees. Through the curtain of water, I could just make out the silhouette again, standing exactly where the cries had come from. Motionless, watching. I raised the bat and slammed it against the fence, the sharp crack cutting through the rain. "I'm warning you," I shouted, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. "Get the hell out of here!" The figure didn't move at first, just stood there, drenched and still. Then, slowly, he turned and walked off into the darkness, his outline fading behind the curtain of rain until it was gone. I stayed there for a moment, listening. Nothing but the downpour, My heart was hammering, but I told myself it was over. I went back inside, locked the door, and peeled off my soaked slippers. By the time I lay back down, the steady hum of my fan almost lulled me into thinking it had been a dream. Then the crying started again, louder this time, sharper. I froze. It was right outside my window. My hand shook as I reached for the blinds, the sound growing more grotesque with every second. I yanked them open, and there he was. His face was pressed against the glass, rainwater streaking down the pale, sickly skin. His eye sockets were sunken and dark, like pits carved into his skull. And that smile, wide, unnatural, stretching ear to ear, warped as he let out another wailing, infant-like cry. I stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of my rug as I scrambled for my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. "There's someone outside my house," I yelled into the receiver. The operator tried to calm me down, said officers were on their way, but every second felt like an hour. I kept my eyes locked on the window the whole time. The man didn't move, just kept pressing his face against the glass, that awful grin frozen in place. Then, as the wail of distant sirens finally reached my ears, he turned and vanished into the dark. The police took forever to arrive. By then, the rain had stopped completely. The air was heavy and still, the kind of silence that feels wrong after a storm. They swept the yard, checked the fence, even looked around the trees. Nothing. Just muddy footprints leading up to my window prints that seemed to fade and disappear halfway back toward the woods. They told me it was probably a prank, maybe someone passing through. I nodded and pretended to believe them. When they left, the house felt emptier than ever. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was over. For a while, it was quiet. Then came the sound again, the baby's cry. Closer. I sat up, furious and terrified all at once. "Enough!" I muttered, flipping on the light. That's when I saw the muddy footprints, fresh, leading across my carpet right up to the closet door. The crying was louder now, coming from inside. I stood there staring at the closet, my breath shallow, the sound of that awful crying still leaking out from behind the door. My hand tightened around the bat as I took slow, cautious steps forward, the floorboards creaking under my feet. When I finally reached the handle, I hesitated just long enough to hate myself for it, then yanked the door open. The crying stopped. Inside, on the closet floor, lay something small and wet. I squinted, leaning closer. It wasn't a baby. It wasn't even human. It was a tiny, half-formed bird, pink skin, stretched thin, its wings barely developed, trembling slightly as if still alive. A baby bird fetus. I stumbled back, disgusted and confused. "What the hell?" I whispered, my voice cracking. The smell hit me next, something sour and metallic, and I covered my mouth, trying not to gag. Then a sound from behind me made my blood run cold. Thud. I whipped my head around. My bed had moved, bouncing once, hard enough to rattle the frame. Another thud, then the blanket began to shift, as if something underneath was crawling, pushing its way up. The fabric stretched and lifted, slowly spreading over a single, human-sized lump right in the center. A baby's cry suddenly shot into my ear, so sharp and close it felt like came from inside my head right against my eardrum. The sound burst through me, rupturing something deep within. I screamed and clutched my ear as warm blood began to run down my neck, thick and hot against my skin. Still half bent over, I stared at the bed. The lump under the blanket was moving again, slowly rising and falling as if it were breathing. I didn't have my bat. I dropped it somewhere near the closet, and my phone was my only weapon left. I grabbed it, but the screen was dead, black, reflecting only my shaking face. Panic took over. Without thinking, I hurled it at the bed. The second it hit, a pale, bony hand shot out from beneath the blanket, impossibly fast. It snatched the phone midair and slammed it down onto the floor, the crack of shattering glass echoing through the room. Then came the sounds again, high-pitched, gurgling baby noises layered and distorted, as if dozens of tiny throats were crying all at once from inside the mattress. Suddenly, the blanket began to bulge and writhe. One by one, tiny shapes pushed their way out from underneath, then tumbled onto the floor with wet, heavy thuds. Dozens of them. Ash-white babies. Their skin almost translucent under the light. Eyes sealed shut, yet still crying. Each sound piercing and unnatural. They began crawling toward me, their little limbs jerking in unnatural rhythm, their cries overlapping into a deafening chorus. I stumbled back, kicking at the floor, but there were too many. Cold, slick hands clung to my legs, my arms, my clothes. I tried to scream as they climbed higher, their mouths opening wide, too wide, and then the biting started. Tiny teeth sank into my skin, my arms, my neck, my face. I swung and thrashed, but they just kept coming, the room echoing with a shrill, endless sound of crying. And then everything stopped. The sound, the movement, the pain. The room was still, the biting, the screaming, all of it gone. I blinked through tears and blood, chest heaving, and realized sunlight was slipping through the blinds. Morning. The floor was empty. No babies, no hand. Just the wreckage of my room, blood on the carpet, my shattered phone beside the bed, and muddy prints fading into nothing. I don't remember much after that. I managed to get myself to the hospital where they treated my wounds and ran tests. The cuts didn't make sense, they said, but they stitched me up and told me to rest. Now I'm home again. The house feels too quiet. My ear still throbs where the drum burst, and I swear sometimes I can hear faint crying when I close my eyes. The sun's going down soon, and I'm scared of what tonight has to bring.